The death of Shireen Abu Akleh, killed whilst covering IDF raids for Al Jazeera in Jenin, sent shockwaves around the world and put one global superpower in an uncomfortable position. Washington has been reluctant to criticise Israel, even though the US determined that Israel was likely to blame for the journalist's death. But behind the scenes, things have not been so subtle. According to reports, the US asked Israel to review the IDF's rules of engagement, meaning under which circumstances it should use military force during operations in the West Bank. Reportedly, this occurred after US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Shireen Abu Akleh's family and then called Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz, saying that either the rules of engagement were not followed or should be reviewed if Abu Akleh was killed whilst wearing a press vest. He also said that reviewing these rules of engagement will lead to greater accountability in case there are future situations like the one we saw in Jenin last May. The US getting involved in Israeli military strategy is unusual, so why has it done this now? And despite mounting pressure to condemn Israel, why has Washington only done so behind closed doors? Where does the US really stand on Israel and Israeli security? Why has Joe Biden not yet met with the family of Shireen Abu Akleh? Should Israel review the IDF's rules of engagement?
So let's get to it. Should the IDF review its rules of engagement? You know the rules, gentlemen. You each get 30 seconds to lay out your initial stance, and we pick up the conversation right after. So Dr. Oren, please take the lead.
Should Israel review its open fire orders? Categorically, absolutely not. This is a sovereign matter for the state of Israel. Can you imagine the state of Israel said to the United States that its soldiers to review its open fire orders? We shouldn't be giving in to this type of pressure under any circumstances. When I was in Knesset, I actually pressed for harder open fire orders, giving more leeway to soldiers to determine the nature of threats against them. And the fighting in Jenin on May 11th, in which Shireen Abu Akleh was killed, IDF forces came under massive small arms and grenade fire. They return fire. We cannot endanger the lives of our soldiers in any way to appease internal political pressures in the United States.
Amir Oren, your take?
Well, Ambassador Oren and myself are not related, but on this subject, we are very close. It's hypocritical and condescending on the part of the United States to say to another country, in this case Israel, what it should do regarding its forces, when Israel has been very economical with its force, while the United States, as Secretary Austin has told the Defense Department, was not so much. But obviously they are going through the motions in order to appease the Palestinians.
Appeasing the Palestinians, definitely something the White House should be considering. Last but definitely not least, Major General Dangot, your take?
I think that, as my two colleagues said, that we don't have to change anything. No one can replace a soldier in the field when he's under such circumstances. I think the answer that thousands of cases like this ended in a way that we know to separate between people who are journalists and other. I think from my experience there is a time to sit with the Americans if they need something to understand and to explain them as between friends.
Well, if we're all in agreement, we can wrap up this debate. I'm just kidding. And from this point onwards, please feel free to interact. But let me ask you, gentlemen, maybe it is an opportunity in disguise, so to speak. Perhaps the opening fire protocol is too lenient, Major General Dangot.
Absolutely, as I said, we don't have to change anything and not to replace the commanders in the area, in the field, that there is a very clear divided between those who are fighting in the field under circumstances of threat to their life and the others. The orders are very clear. I think there is no army like us that operate in such areas under such threats and circumstances where everybody's shooting around you and civil people are there and succeed in his mission. I think the orders are clear. I think that every time that we find any kind of a problem, we investigate and we take lessons and conclusions.
Can I add a couple of statistics, Ellie?
Please.
A couple of statistics. Since 1990, there have been 2,700 journalists killed in action, in combat situations. The United States was responsible for 700 of those deaths in its wars in Iraq and Syria. No investigations, no call for changing the open fire orders of the United States of America's Army, none whatsoever. Tragically, there have been journalists killed covering violence in Judea and Samaria and Gaza. But since 1990, fewer journalists have been killed covering those areas than have been killed in the last 5 months in the Ukraine. Which goes to say that even though journalists are covering this issue intensely all the time, fewer journalists have been killed covering this fighting since 1990 than have been killed in the last 5 months in the Ukraine.
Wow. These are...
The only distinction Shireen had was her American passport. Had she been a mere Palestinian or a mere Israeli, no one in the United States would have cared about her. Now, the rules of engagement are really taken from law enforcement, from police action. You ask the suspect to halt. When they start running, you shoot in the air, and only if you are feeling in danger yourself as a police officer do you shoot to maim or kill. And in these circumstances, when there are terrorists who are trying to cross over into Israel in order to perpetrate a crime, Israel leans forward in order to still act like the police rather than like an armed force.
But gentlemen, with the extensive West Bank operations we're seeing in recent months, is the next operational malfunction, perhaps this is a good way to phrase it, just a matter of time, Amir?
No.
I think that... Yes,
well,
please.
you know, these operations are usually conducted at night in order to avoid friction with the larger population. But some of the armed men around the wanted personnel are shooting at the soldiers who have to shoot back. And yes, if someone is in the line of fire, Israelis too, and Israeli troops also, as we have seen only a few days ago, when one soldier mistook his body for a terrorist and shot him. This happens in combat operations. It's regrettable, but Israel should not change its conduct.
Major General Dangot, you wanted to...
Yes, I would like to add another thing, that from the time that Shireen unfortunately has been killed, and it's really sad and it's really serious event, and I think that in the area, from what I heard and was told, there was a very deep way of investigation. But just count how many operational activities has been taken from that event, and how many times, how many Israeli soldiers were under threat from local population, you know, from entering, putting the hand on the terrorists, and no one said any word about those who are arrested or are shooting when they refuse to be arrested, and going outside from the villages, everybody is shooting there from all the sides. These scenarios shows the complication in the West Bank in these days. And I highly appreciate the way that Israel is taking the measures inside the area, is not enabling those terrorists to go outside from their area in making such kind of massacre any place else, and on the other end are doing it basically with a way of not damaging those who are not involved, as a way of acting.
And Dr. Oren, you know, in light of incidents like Shireen Abu Akleh, I'm going back to Elor Azaria, and inconsistency perhaps with the increase in combat documentation, and you know, I can't really forget this incident in which border police officers foiled a terrorist attempt in Jerusalem, and immediately after their weapons were taken. The border police officers, because they were under investigation. And my question to you is, or perhaps Israeli fighters are reluctant or deterred to actually open fire? We lost Dr. Oren for a bit, so Amir?
Well, we haven't seen this concern, which was indeed expressed. We haven't seen it in the field because usually the chain of command is very strict, and the troopers, the privates and the corporals take their cues from their lieutenants and majors. Yes, it can happen, especially when a body is by mistake being shot, as has happened very recently. But no, usually these body system operations go very well, even though they feel the danger. They are not trigger happy, and we have seen that most of the cases are quite smooth. And if you join one of them, you will see how complicated it is and how the commanders have to balance the moral and operational constraints. And it's really almost a miracle that most of them, as General Dangot mentioned, are successful.
And Major General Dangot, is it a matter of lack of clarity or perhaps the changing reality that is creating this slight confusion? I will put it that way.
I think that I would like to take you to understand what is a soldier facing 24 hours, 7 days a week when he's acting in this area, when he has such a very, I believe, strong restrictions about what and how to do, how to fulfill his mission. A lot is under his shoulders, a lot of weight. A soldier is impact strategic events in the area, and they know it. Those and the young commanders, and the way they are succeeding, and I said it 3 times, but succeeding in their missions are showing the way that we are working with them and about the way the soldiers are behaving. I don't believe there will be many such units all over the world that acting in such a way in trying to fulfill the mission without being wounding those who are involved in this area.
And we're staying on topic. Before we dive into back into the conversation, let's take a quick listen to the brother of Shireen Abu Akleh voicing his frustration by the fact that U.S. President Joe Biden did not want to meet the family when he was around here, the Middle East, earlier this year. Let's take a listen.
My name is Anton Abu Akleh, and Shireen was my little sister. When President Biden was coming to Jerusalem earlier this month, I thought for sure he would meet with us. A U.S. citizen, a prominent journalist, beloved by millions of people, was killed by a highly trained Israeli soldier. President Biden was 10 minutes away. He never came to see us. So we had to come here to Washington with support from a community of wonderful people who share our commitment to justice for Shireen. We were able to arrange meetings with more than a dozen members of Congress, some of whom are standing beside me. President Biden still hasn't agreed to meet us. We need him to hear from us directly so that he understands the pain our family and too many other Palestinians have endured.
So let's get to it. Will this incident continue to resonate in this triangle of Washington, Jerusalem, and Ramallah? Let's open this part of the debate with another quick 30-second round each, and we continue after that. Dr. Oren, please take the lead.
Certainly, I share the sorrow, can understand the sorrow of the Abu Akleh family, and they have my deepest condolences. But the fact that the United States has not investigated the dozens, if not hundreds, of journalists which its forces have killed over the course of the last 20, 30 years. The only reason that the administration actually repeatedly called for an open and transparent investigation, impugning the integrity of our military, of our judicial system, of our sovereignty, is because of internal domestic political pressures from the Democratic Party. The United States shouldn't give into it. Israel should definitely not give into it.
Major General Dangot, your thoughts?
I think that, as I said, it's a very sad story, and my feelings also with the family. On the other hand, I think that United States is such a country, there is a lot on the way, on the procedure that can supply information to the family, like the ambassador. From my experience, the United States representative are making a very deep meetings and asking for details and data when they're coming to get information about their civilians.
Last but definitely not least, Mr. Amir Oren.
Well, whoever killed Shireen did not do it willfully. It could have happened from either side. Had the Palestinians given the bullet for a professional forensic investigation immediately, we would have known what happened. But in any event, it was a tragic death. It was not premeditated, and there is no reason, save for politics and some effort to gain diplomatically, to make too much of it.
And speaking to that point exactly, Dr. Michael Oren, I will not ask whether the U.S. is crossing a line or not, because all of your opinions seems to be clear in that. I will rather ask what is perhaps the trigger that emboldens Washington to cross this line.
It's called the midterm elections, Ellie. The Democrats are not faring well in the polls. They have to activate and energize their progressive base, and the administration's under pressure to do so. But again, Israel does not have to buckle to that, and the administration, frankly, shouldn't buckle to it either.
So again, it seems to be a consensus among the three of you that the IDF should not comply with this request. I would say, but does the mere request, does it open the door for further American intervention in Israeli internal policy?
No, not really. The IDF will probably review it, and having reviewed it, will be satisfied that it's fine as it is. It's a bump in the road. The United States has forgiven Mohammed bin Salman for the Khashoggi affair, which was a premeditated murder. Here, this too will pass.
Yes, Dr. Oren, you wanted to add something?
I agree with that. It's unpleasant, and it may open the door for pressures from other countries, particularly for the Europeans.
And Major General Dangot, perhaps more broadly, where does the U.S. really stand when it comes to Israeli security? Are we getting a glimpse into the quote-unquote genuine sentiment in the corridors of the White House, or is it merely political, midterm-oriented, as we've heard from the Orens?
I think that without any contact to the very warm relationship between Israel and the United States, I was in meetings that I was asked not easy questions, and I think there is a lot of respect, belief, and trust between Israel and the United States when it does with issues of security, when it's coming to the field, or when it's coming to other kind of questions concerning security. I think that the relationship and the culture between both sides are so deep and under belief that you really look in the eyes and talk truly and bring things that everybody understand what was told or explained.
And Ellie, if I may add,
please.
President Biden and many, not all, but many in the Democratic Party are better friends of Israel than the Trumpian and evangelical wings of the Republican Party. And Biden has shown his friendship to Israel in word and deed over the years, and Israel can count on his friendship, including in the JCPOA talks regarding the Iran nuclear enterprise.
And speaking of the Iran, the attempts to revive the nuclear deal, always a timely topic, but in the coming days seems to be even more so. We do hear for the first time some Israeli officials admitting or acknowledging perhaps miscalculations on behalf of Jerusalem's handling of the situation. Do you think, Dr. Oren, that we're likely to see this trend intensifying in terms of the Israeli position vis-a-vis the nuclear deal?
I think it's made by a former official of the IDF, correct?
Correct.
And remember, that maybe 1, 5, or 6 high-ranking members or former high-ranking members of the defense establishment have come out in defense of the JCPOA, but there are hundreds and hundreds who are opposed to it, and I'm one of them. And it's not a matter of a mere or instead of trusting the Biden administration. Then we have different interests. America's a big country. It's far from the Middle East, not threatened with national annihilation by the Iranians. We're a small country, and we are threatened with national annihilations. And our margin for error on the Iranian nuclear issue is exactly 0. And the renewal of the JCPOA will put Israel in extremely hazardous strategic situation, and we're going to have to make some very hard decisions.
And before we end this debate, Major General Dangot, obviously the communication line between Washington and Jerusalem is very direct and close throughout the years. But do you identify a difference when it comes to the State Department and the defense and the defense ministry, so to speak? Is there a different stance? Yeah.
First of all, under the umbrella of such a friendship between Israel and the United States, you find always that the State Department are thinking differently sometimes than the Ministry of Defense, or the Ministry of Defense finds much more understanding in the Pentagon, for example. But it's between friends. We are talking about a very subject that Israel is looking on it for its future existence. Between the United States are looking on it on the global. I think that as the State Department and Israeli government know to sit, and this is better way to talk about it in a closed doors, when you can really say the things you are able to influence or to impact or to emphasize or to change a little bit on what is going to be decided concerning the agreement.